Part 1 begins with the soft morning light slowly rising over the wide desert of the American Southwest. The sun, still low, paints the red rocks with warm colors, making the land look peaceful and endless. The desert carries both silence and hidden movement. Small lizards run between stones. The wind carries a dusty smell. And far in the distance, birds fly low in search of water. It is in this calm but unpredictable land that a young Apache girl named Nalin finds herself walking alone. Nalin is no more than 13 or 14, with long, dark hair and bright, alert eyes. She has grown up learning how to read the desert, how clouds move, how the wind changes, and how every trail tells a story. Her people taught her from a young age that nature is a guide, not an enemy. But even the best guide can sometimes hide surprises. And on this day, a sudden storm had swept through the land without warning. Dust rose like a wall, winds rushed like waves, and in the loud confusion, Nalin was separated from her small traveling group. Even though she was frightened, she remembered what her elders taught her. Stay calm. Watch the land. Listen to the wind. The storm passed after some minutes, leaving silence behind. But her group was nowhere in sight. Only their footprints remained on the soft sand, stretching toward a rocky path, so she followed them with hope in her heart. As she walked, she whispered encouraging words to herself. She reminded herself that her people were nearby. She had only drifted slightly off the main path. The sun was rising, the day was clear, and she believed she would reunite with them soon. Her steps were steady, and her eyes stayed sharp. But the desert can change moods quickly. While trying to cross a narrow canyon path, Nalin stepped on what looked like solid ground. Instead, it was a loose patch of soil near an old tree leaning over the canyon's edge. The soil gave way beneath her foot, and she slipped downward, grabbing onto whatever she could reach. Her hand caught a branch, but the sudden weight made the branch twist, and she found herself dangling awkwardly. Caught and tangled, she was not in immediate danger of falling far, but she was stuck. The more she tried to move, the more the dry branches wrapped around her clothing, trapping her. She tried to pull herself up, but the angle was wrong. She tried to free her clothes, but the branch kept tightening. After several attempts, she realized she had to save her energy. She stopped struggling and looked up at the sky, breathing slowly. She was safe, but not free. She could not climb up, and she could not drop down without getting hurt. The desert was still, and she was alone. For a long moment, Nalin simply listened to the quiet wind brushing against the rocks. She thought of her mother's voice telling her to trust the world around her. So she closed her eyes and whispered a small prayer in her own language, asking for strength, for guiding hands, for safety. When she opened her eyes again, the world looked the same, but something in her heart felt calmer. She called out softly at first, testing her voice, then louder. Help! Is anyone there? Far from her resting place, a cowboy named Caleb Turner was riding his horse along the canyon's outer path. Caleb was a traveler who rarely stayed in one place for long. He enjoyed open land, wide skies, and long roads where he could think. He had a calm face, gentle eyes, and a habit of talking to his horse as though it were a close friend. That morning, he had no special plan. He was simply following the trail to the next settlement, where he hoped to find water and supplies. As he guided his horse along the path, Caleb heard something unusual. It wasn't the cry of an animal or the whistle of wind. It was softer, almost a whisper carried across the still air. He slowed his horse, listening again. For a moment, he heard only silence. But then, faintly and clearly, he heard it again, a human voice calling for help. Caleb's eyebrows lifted in concern. He knew the desert was no place for someone to be stranded. He followed the sound carefully, guiding his horse closer to the narrow canyon path. As he approached, he noticed movement in the corner of his eye. There, hanging from a leaning tree, was a young girl tangled, tired, and clearly struggling. Without hesitation, he climbed off his horse and moved cautiously toward her. The ground was uneven, and the tree looked old and fragile. As he got closer, he could see the fear in her eyes. mixed with relief at seeing another person. "It's all right," Caleb said gently. "I'm here. I'll help you." Nalin sighed with both hope and nervousness. She didn't know who he was, but she could see kindness in his expression. She nodded slowly, trusting that he meant no harm. Caleb studied the situation carefully. The branches were twisted around her clothes, but not strong enough to hold much weight. One wrong pull might break the branch, and he didn't want her to slip, so he moved slowly, placing his hands on stable parts of the tree. He told her to stay as still as possible while he worked. He untangled one branch at a time, speaking softly to keep her calm. "You're doing great," he said. "Just a little more." Nalin tried not to move, watching him with steady eyes. She felt grateful, but also embarrassed that she needed rescuing. Still, there was no other choice. Finally, after careful effort, Caleb freed the last piece of cloth. He supported her weight as she climbed gently back onto solid ground. When her feet touched the earth again, she breathed a long, shaky breath, filled with relief. "Thank you," she whispered. Her voice was soft but full of sincerity. Caleb smiled. "You're welcome. Are you hurt?" She shook her head. "Just tired." Caleb studied her clothing and recognized she belonged to a nearby Apache group. He had heard stories about them all his life, many of them unkind or exaggerated, but something about the quiet strength in her eyes made him question those old tales. "You're a long way from company," he said gently. "Where is your group?" Nalin looked down the trail anxiously. "We were traveling when a storm came. I lost them. I need to find them before they move too far." Caleb nodded. "You shouldn't walk alone in this heat. I can help you find them." Nalin looked unsure for a moment. She didn't want to burden him. She also didn't fully know if she should trust a stranger. But she remembered the thought she had earlier: trust the world around her. This man had already shown kindness by saving her. "Please," she said softly. "I need to go back to my family." Caleb gently smiled. "Then let's find them together." He guided her toward his horse and gave her some water. She drank slowly, grateful for the cool relief. Caleb asked questions only when necessary: how long she had walked, what direction her people usually traveled, and if she remembered any landmarks. Nalin answered carefully but honestly, still watching him with curious eyes. As they began walking down the trail together, the desert around them felt different. It no longer felt empty. It felt like the beginning of something unexpected. Caleb didn't know where this journey would lead him. Nalin didn't know how long it would take to find her people. But at that moment, one thing was clear. Their paths had crossed for a reason neither of them yet understood. Their walk continued quietly at first, each step carrying a mix of hope, uncertainty, and new trust. The sun climbed higher, warming the land, and the two unlikely companions started a journey that would shape both their lives in ways they could not yet imagine. As Caleb and Nalin continued down the winding trail, the desert slowly changed around them. The morning heat grew stronger, and the sky brightened into a wide, clear blue. The land stretched far in every direction, with tall cliffs on one side and soft sand on the other. It was the kind of place where sound traveled easily, but people rarely crossed paths. Yet, on this day, two completely different lives were now walking side by side. Caleb kept a gentle pace so Nalin wouldn't tire too quickly. She walked quietly beside him, her steps light but steady. Every few minutes she glanced at the horizon, searching for any sign of her people's smoke, footprints, movement, anything familiar. Caleb noticed her worry but didn't press her with questions. He understood that fear of being separated from family could sit heavy on a person's heart. After some time, Caleb spoke softly. "We'll find them. The land tells more than people think. You just have to know how to listen." Nalin nodded. "I try to listen. My grandfather used to tell me the desert has a voice, but today, everything feels confusing." Caleb smiled gently. "Sometimes confusion is just part of the journey. We'll figure it out together." She looked at him with curiosity. She didn't know his story yet, but she sensed patience in him, something calm and steady, like the slow movement of shadows on rocks. They continued walking until Caleb finally asked a simple question. "What's your name?" "I don't think I heard it earlier." "Nolan," she replied softly. "What is yours?" "Caleb," he answered. "Caleb Turner." There was a lightness in sharing names. It made the distance between them feel a little smaller. A few minutes passed before Nolan spoke again. "Thank you for helping me. I know you didn't have to." Caleb shook his head. "Of course I had to. If someone needs help, you help them. That's what my mother used to say." His voice warmed slightly when he mentioned her, as though the memory brought comfort. Nolan smiled at that. She liked the way he spoke with honesty, without showing off. Caleb then cleared his throat gently, as if thinking carefully before speaking. "Since we'll be walking for a while, maybe we can make the journey less quiet." Nolan looked at him with a curious tilt of her head. "How?" "Well," Caleb rubbed the back of his neck, a bit shy. "I have one small request. Not money or anything like that, just something simple." Nolan watched him carefully, wondering what this price might be. After a short pause, Caleb finished his thought. "Tell me your story," he said. "Tell me about your life, your people, the things you love, the things you've learned. I've heard many things growing up, but I want to hear the truth from you." Nolan blinked in surprise. She hadn't expected that. She thought he might ask for something difficult, or something she couldn't give. Instead, he asked for her story, something that belonged to her. Something she didn't often share with strangers. "Why do you want to know?" she asked, her voice gentle but cautious. Caleb looked ahead at the open desert. "Because I've met many people on the road. And each time, I realize how little I understand about the world. I want to learn. Your people. I've heard so many things, but they never felt right. I want to know what is real." His words felt honest. There was no judgment, no fear, only curiosity. Nolan thought for a moment. She wasn't used to speaking about her culture to outsiders, and some things were not meant to be shared. But he wasn't asking for secrets only, for understanding, and he had saved her life, without expecting anything in return. That counted for something. So she nodded. "I can tell you some things. Not everything, but enough." "That's more than enough," Caleb said, with a grateful smile. They continued walking as she began her story. She spoke slowly, choosing her words carefully. "My people travel with the seasons. We follow the paths of animals and look for places where the water still flows. We live close to the land because the land gives life." Caleb listened quietly, absorbing every word. "My mother teaches weaving. She makes blankets that show stories, mountains, rain, sunlight. My father hunts when needed, but he always thanks the land for what it offers. And my grandfather, he teaches everyone. He says stories are the heart of a family." Caleb smiled softly. "That sounds beautiful," Nolan continued, gaining confidence as she spoke. "Our people believe everything is connected. The sky, the ground, the animals, the rivers, even the wind. We don't own the land. We live with it." Caleb nodded slowly. "I like that way of thinking. Back where I grew up, people rushed through life. They didn't always take time to notice things." She looked at him curiously. "Where did you grow up?" He chuckled lightly. "A small town with more dust than houses. My father worked with cattle. My mother taught me to read. I spent most of my childhood riding horses and dreaming about traveling far." "So you left?" she asked. "Eventually," he said. "I wanted to see more than fences and fields. The world felt bigger, and I wanted to understand it." Nolan listened closely, realizing they were very different but somehow similar in their desire to understand the world around them. As they walked, Caleb pointed toward a patch of ground. "Look there, footprints." Nolan stepped closer. Her eyes scanned the prints carefully. "Yes. But these are from earlier. The sand is smooth on the edges. The storm wind softened them." Caleb admired her skill. "You see things I would miss. My grandfather always said the earth remembers everything," she replied softly. They followed the footprints until they faded. They stopped under a small patch of shade beneath a rock ledge. Caleb offered Nalin more water, and she drank slowly, preserving each sip. After a brief rest, she continued sharing small details, how her people danced during celebrations, how children learned to ride horses early, how families told stories around the fire. She spoke of laughter, warmth, and the small joys of everyday life. Her voice softened as she described the comfort of sleeping under the stars, surrounded by songs her elders sang. Caleb listened with deep interest, realizing how wrong many of his old beliefs were. She wasn't what stories made her people sound like. She was kind, thoughtful, and wise beyond her age. At one point, Caleb finally spoke again. "Thank you for sharing all that. I know it isn't easy to trust someone you just met." Nalin shrugged shyly. "You helped me. I wanted to give something back. Stories are important to us. They are how we show respect." He nodded gently. "Then I'm honored." The sun began lowering slowly, though it was still bright. As they continued their journey, Caleb noticed something else. The more she spoke, the lighter her steps became, as though sharing her story gave her new strength. Eventually, Nalin asked him a question. "Why do you travel alone? Don't you feel lonely?" Caleb smiled softly. "Sometimes, but I meet people on the road. And sometimes, meeting one person changes everything." Nalin looked away, pretending not to understand, but her cheeks warmed slightly from the kind tone in his words. They walked past tall rocks and dry bushes, following subtle signs that only Nalin could read. Caleb stayed alert, watching the land but also keeping an eye on her. He didn't want her to feel like she was walking alone anymore. Hours passed, and they continued their slow but steady journey. Caleb felt grateful not just for the company, but for the view into her world that he never expected to witness. And Nalin felt lighter, knowing she wasn't facing the desert alone. As the day grew older, a soft quiet settled between them. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was peaceful, like two travelers learning to understand each other without needing many words. Their journey was far from over, but something had already changed between them. The price Caleb asked for her story was not a burden. It became a bridge, a small connection in a wide and complicated world. Neither of them knew what awaited ahead. But for now, walking side by side under the endless desert sky felt like the beginning of something meaningful, something they would both remember for a very long time. Hours passed as Caleb and Nalin continued their steady journey through the desert. The sky slowly changed from bright blue to a softer shade, and the heat began to ease. Long shadows stretched across the land as the afternoon sun lowered toward the horizon. The light became warm and golden, turning the rocks into glowing shapes and the sand into a shining path. It was a peaceful time of day, but both of them knew the quiet might not last forever. Nalin kept looking ahead with hope but also worry. She wanted to find her family soon. Her people did not stay in one place for long, especially after a storm. If they kept moving, the distance between them could grow too large. Still, she reminded herself not to panic. She had Caleb beside her, and she trusted his steady steps. Caleb kept checking the land around them, trying to understand what she saw. He respected her silence and didn't rush her with questions. He noticed the way she paused every few minutes to study the ground or look at the sky. She listened to the wind as if it whispered secrets. Caleb admired that. He wished he could read the land the way she did. After a while, Nalin stopped suddenly. She knelt beside a patch of soft sand and brushed her hand lightly across it. Caleb watched her quietly, waiting for her to speak. "These are fresh tracks," she said softly. "They belong to my people. They passed through here today." Caleb's heart lifted with hope for her. "Do you think we can catch up?" She nodded slowly. "Yes. But we must move carefully. They travel in groups. Sometimes they send scouts ahead to watch for danger." Caleb understood. He didn't want to alarm anyone. The last thing he wanted was to be mistaken for a threat. They continued walking, following the tracks as the golden light slowly faded. The wind grew softer, and the desert took on a calm evening glow. Caleb felt the quietness settling around them like a blanket, but Nalin seemed more alert now. She knew they were getting close. As they walked, Caleb finally said, "You've been very brave today." Nalin looked down shyly. "I just want to go home." "And you will," he said gently. She gave him a small smile before turning her attention back to the trail. But just as the sun reached the edge of the horizon, a sudden movement caught Nalin's eye. She froze, then held out a hand to signal Caleb to stop. He immediately obeyed, sensing the change in her posture. "What is it?" he whispered. "Someone is watching us," she whispered back. "Don't move too quickly. Don't look around suddenly." Caleb felt a quiet tension rise in the air. He trusted her instincts completely. He kept his eyes on the ground, pretending not to notice anything. Nalin slowly lifted her chin and looked toward a rocky ledge in the distance. The breeze shifted, and she noticed a slight glimmer sunlight reflecting off metal or polished stone. Then came a faint movement, too smooth to be wind. "They are scouts from my people," she whispered. "They see us, and they don't know who you are." Caleb kept his voice low. "Then let's make sure they know we're not here to cause trouble." Before he could say anything more, two figures stepped out from behind the rocks. They were young Apache scouts, both older than Nalin. Their expressions were sharp, and their eyes were filled with protective intensity. They moved quickly but carefully, approaching with the confidence of people trained to watch their land. Nalin stepped forward before they could say anything. "Wait." "He helped me." One of the scouts raised his hand, signaling her to stop. His voice was firm but not harsh. "Nalin, are you hurt? Why are you with him?" Nalin's heart raced. She didn't want them to misunderstand. "I got separated during the storm," she explained quickly. "I slipped, and I was stuck. He saved me. He helped me find you." The scouts glanced at Caleb, their expressions still cautious. Caleb stood calmly, hands relaxed at his sides. He didn't want to make any sudden movements. He simply nodded, politely. "I mean no harm," he said in a steady voice. "I only wanted to help her return safely." The older scout stepped closer, studying Caleb carefully. The desert made people wary. Many travelers carried their own stories, and not all were peaceful ones. But Caleb's calm expression and respectful distance spoke for him. Nalin continued speaking before the scouts could question further. "He gave me water. He stayed with me. He listened to me. He asked for nothing." The scouts exchanged glances. They had known Nalin since she was small. They trusted her judgment. If she said someone had helped her, it was likely true. The younger scout finally softened. "If what you say is true, then he has done a good thing. But he must come with us so the elders can hear the whole story." Caleb nodded without hesitation. "Of course." The scouts motioned for them to follow. Nalin walked beside Caleb, slightly nervous, but she felt relief filling her heart. They were close, very close to her people. As they approached a wide-open area near a small grove of trees, Nalin saw smoke rising gently from a fire. Her heartbeat quickened. These were her people. This was home. Her mother saw her first. She ran forward with tears of relief in her eyes. She held Nalin close, whispering her name over and over. Nalin clung to her tightly, feeling warmth return to her heart. Caleb stepped back respectfully, not wanting to intrude on the reunion. He felt a quiet happiness watching them. He had never seen such strong love wrapped in such gentle arms. But the joyful moment was not the end of the tension. Several elders approached, their expressions serious. They looked at Caleb with caution. One of them, an older man with kind but wise eyes, stepped forward. "Who is this man?" he asked. Before Caleb could speak, Nalin stepped forward confidently. "He is a traveler who saved my life. I was stuck on a tree after the storm. He came, he helped, and he brought me back to you." The elders listened quietly. Caleb then spoke in a respectful tone. I only did what anyone should do. She needed help. I was there. The older man studied his face for a long moment. The silence felt heavy, but not unfriendly. Finally, he nodded. You acted with kindness, he said. For that, we thank you. Caleb lowered his head slightly in acknowledgement. I'm grateful she's safe. Nolan's father stepped forward. He placed a gentle hand on Caleb's shoulder. You guided our daughter back to us. That is something we will remember. The scouts relaxed. The tension in the air faded into something calmer, almost warm. Caleb felt a sense of acceptance slowly forming. Though he knew he was still a stranger among them, Nalan stood beside him, her eyes bright with gratitude. I told you we would find them, she whispered softly. Caleb smiled. Yes, you were right. As night settled in, the camp grew quiet. The elders prepared to speak more with Caleb. The scouts kept watch. Families gathered close together, and Nalan glanced at the sky, feeling safe for the first time since the storm. It had been a long day, filled with fear, hope, and unexpected friendship. And though Caleb did not know what the next moments would bring, he felt something inside him changing, something gentle and strong. The misunderstanding had passed, but a new chapter was opening, one that would shape both their lives in ways they had not yet imagined. Night fell gently over the Apache camp. The sky turned a deep blue, sprinkled with bright stars that looked close enough to touch. A soft breeze moved through the trees, carrying the smell of burning wood from the cooking fires. Families gathered in small circles, speaking quietly about the day. Children rested near their mothers. Elders sat close together, and scouts watched the edges of the camp. Despite the late hour, the place felt warm and safe. Caleb stood slightly apart from the main group, not wanting to intrude. He respected their space. He understood that being welcomed into someone's home even temporarily was a delicate thing. He leaned lightly against a tree, hands resting peacefully at his sides, and watched as Nalan reunited fully with her family. Her father had checked her carefully, making sure she wasn't hurt. Her mother kept touching her hair and cheeks, as if she couldn't believe her daughter was really there. Nalan, who had held her emotions strong throughout the long journey, finally relaxed. She felt the comfort of home settling deep in her heart. She glanced over her shoulder at Caleb, standing quietly nearby. Her mother followed her gaze and noticed the cowboy for the first time. She stepped toward him, her expression kind but cautious. You brought my daughter back, she said softly. For that, I thank you. Caleb bowed his head politely. I'm glad she's safe. The mother nodded and returned to her family, leaving Caleb to breathe out slowly. He wasn't used to such gentle gratitude. It warmed him more than the nearby fire did. Soon after, the elders invited Caleb to sit with them. They formed a circle near the fire, and Caleb joined respectfully, sitting slightly behind Nalan's father, showing he understood his place as a visitor. The flames danced softly between them, lighting their faces in orange glow. The oldest elder spoke first. His voice was calm and full of experience. We want to understand your intentions, he said. You helped our child, and we respect that. But we want to know more about the man who walked beside her. Caleb nodded. That is fair. He chose his words carefully. I am a traveler. I move from place to place, doing small jobs, helping where I can. When I heard her call for help, I did what anyone with a heart should do. Another elder asked, Did you expect something in return? Caleb shook his head gently. No. But I asked her to share her story while we walked. Not because I wanted payment, because I wanted to learn. I've heard many things about your people, and I never believed they were all true. Listening to her helped me understand more. The elders exchanged glances, surprised by his honesty. Nalan's grandfather spoke slowly. It is rare for an outsider to want understanding instead of judgment. He paused. That shows a good spirit. Nalan, sitting beside her family, looked at Caleb with quiet pride. She knew he spoke from the heart. As the conversation continued, The elders learned more about Caleb's life, how he grew up, why he traveled, and the values he held. He spoke humbly, without trying to impress anyone. Everything he said was simple, truthful, and steady. After some time, Naline's father finally spoke. "You have done more than bring her back. You guided her, protected her, and respected her. For that, our family is grateful." Caleb nodded, touched by the sincerity in the man's voice. The elder closest to the fire then made a gentle decision. "Tonight, you stay as our guest. You will eat with us, and tomorrow when the sun rises, we will talk again." Caleb agreed politely, grateful for their kindness. Soon after, the families began preparing food. A warm, soft aroma filled the air. Nalin approached Caleb, carrying a wooden bowl filled with vegetables and warm bread. "I brought this for you," she said with a shy smile. Caleb accepted it with gratitude. "Thank you. You didn't have to. My mother told me to," she replied with a small laugh. "She said someone who helps family should not sit hungry." He smiled warmly. "Your mother is a wise woman." Nalin sat beside him, keeping a respectful distance. The fire crackled nearby, sending sparks into the sky. For a while, they ate quietly, enjoying the calm night. After they finished, Nalin broke the silence gently. "Are you leaving tomorrow?" "Are you leaving tomorrow?" Caleb looked at the stars before answering. "I don't know yet. I don't want to stay where I'm not needed. But I also don't want to leave if your family thinks it's unsafe for me to ride alone in the dark lands." Nalin nodded thoughtfully. "The elders will decide. But I'm glad you stayed for tonight." Caleb looked at her with warmth. "I'm glad too." She told him how her family had worried about her, how her mother cried during the storm, and how the scouts searched early in the morning. She spoke softly, her voice filled with emotion she hadn't shown earlier. Caleb listened with patience, grateful she felt comfortable sharing more of her heart. When she finished, he said quietly, "Your people have deep love for one another. It is something to admire." Nalin smiled gently, feeling understood. As the fire burned lower, the camp grew quiet. People started settling down to rest. The stars brightened above them, shining like tiny lanterns spread across the sky. Before sleeping, Nalin's grandfather approached Caleb one last time. He handed him a small woven band with simple patterns. "Take this," the old man said. "It is not a gift of ownership, it is a sign of respect. It tells our people you are one who walks with good intentions." Caleb accepted it with deep gratitude. "Thank you. I will honor it." The grandfather nodded and returned to his place, leaving Caleb with a warm feeling in his chest. He tied the woven band to his wrist carefully, treating it with great respect. Later, when the camp finally grew silent, Caleb lay beneath a tree, looking up at the stars. The land felt different tonight, calmer, kinder. He thought about Nalin, about her stories, about the trust they built during the journey. He didn't know what the next day would bring, but he knew he would remember this night for the rest of his life. Morning came gently, with a pale golden light warming the camp. Birds chirped softly, and the breeze carried a fresh smell across the land. Caleb woke early, stretching quietly so as not to disturb anyone. The elders gathered again, and Nalin led Caleb toward them. She walked with confidence now, no longer afraid, no longer alone. The oldest elder spoke kindly. "We talked during the night. You are welcome to stay for a few days if you wish, or you may continue your journey. The choice is yours." Caleb hesitated, touched by the offer. "Your kindness means more than I can say. But I think I should continue my journey. There is a wide world I still want to understand." Nalin looked slightly sad, but she nodded respectfully. "I understand," her father added. "You leave as a friend. May the land guide your steps." Caleb thanked them sincerely. Before he turned to go, Nalin walked up to him. She held something in her hands, a small stone tied with a thread. "This is for you," she said quietly. "It is a blessing stone. Carry it, and you will remember the path we walked together." Caleb accepted it gently, I will treasure it. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. Two lives brought together by chance, shaped by trust, now parting with warmth and respect. Caleb climbed onto his horse. Nalin stepped back beside her family. The sun rose slowly behind them, painting the sky with soft colors. Goodbye, Nalin, Caleb said with a gentle smile. Goodbye, Caleb, she replied. Walk with a safe heart. He rode away slowly, glancing back one last time. Nalin watched him until he disappeared beyond the horizon, her necklace of memories shining in her heart. Their paths had crossed for a brief moment in the endless desert, but the connection they formed, one of kindness, respect, and understanding, would remain with both of them forever.